Is adding Bijan Robinson and JSN in your rookie draft enough to take your team from 7th to 1st in Dynasty Fantasy Football? Possibly. But what other capstone moves can you make to really put your team over the top as we come close to the 2023 fantasy football season? Stay tuned. Tim and I are going to go over all the details.
Hey everyone, this is Tim and Dan from Dynasty Nerds, and we are starting up our Dynasty Team Audit series. This is a new series that Dan and I will be doing where we will be auditing your teams for you, letting you know how you can make improvements, how you could rebuild, how you can retool, and how you can make yourself more competitive in your leagues. One of the perks of being part of the Dynasty Nerds Nerd Herd is you can be a Discord member in our Discord, and on there you can fill out a survey with us that will allow you to be in the pool of teams that we will select and audit. Dan and I will be picking these teams out. We'll be talking about them on these videos in this video series, and we'll be telling you how can you improve your team, how can you make some trades that'll make yourself better, find ways to find better players in the free agency pool, what positions you need help with, what positions you might have an over amount of wealth that you can trade away. And the whole idea here is that we're going to find and help out some of these teams that are on here. So hopefully it's a nice opportunity for you to hear from a third party, someone away from your league and your other teams that are competitive in your league, some opinions on where your team is at and how they can improve. So Dan, I'm pretty excited for this series, and we're going to be starting today with the team thatmandan from the League Hall of No Namers.
Is there any other way to start a series but with a Dan?
With a Dan, exactly. So that Dan and Tim will be auditing thatmandan. We have his team up here now on the Dynasty Nerds 2.0 GM, the DynastyGM 2.0, available on your phone. And looking at his team here real quick, we can check out his quarterbacks, his running backs, wide receivers. But what we can see first off is the name of his team is the start of a dynasty. Nice work. And he is currently by our GM tools rated the number 1 team in this league.
As all Dans should be.
As all Dans should be. The draft picks are definitely adding a good boost to that. But even if you remove draft picks from it, he is still the number 1 team in this league. So the idea here is that he has a very good team, but where can he find even more value in this team? Where can he make improvements, maybe get some depth, or get another premier player to get himself completely over the top and ahead of anyone else in this league? So where would you like to start first, Dan?
So first thing I want to mention is this is a 1 quarterback league.
Sure.
This is not super flex,
Yep.
So keep that in mind when you're looking at the quarterback position, because that's actually the first thing I want to talk about. If we see his quarterbacks over here, we have Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, Will Levis, and Brock Purdy. A very, very strong quarterback room. If we actually go ahead and filter on the GM 2.0 app by quarterback, we can see that this is the strongest quarterback room in the league. We have this is tier 1. We have tier 2 quarterback rooms involving Trevor Lawrence and Lamar Jackson. We have another room with Josh Allen, Bryce Young, Geno Smith, and Desmond Ridder. And another room with
just Patrick Mahomes.
Patrick Mahomes himself is enough to elevate a team.
One guy can be,
that second tier. So it's important to remember the scoring settings and formats in your league, and it's just not necessary to have this many quarterbacks when you're only starting 1 week to week. And now, when I talked to Dan, the one thing he did mention is that the quarterbacks seem to be overvalued in this league, which is something we need to take advantage of right now before people start to realize, like, hey, I don't need 4 starting quarterbacks in 1 quarterback league. I don't know about you, Tim, but personally, in my 1 quarterback leagues, I have to have 2 starters and then a third developmental type of guy, like
absolutely.
a Desmond Ridder, Sam Howell, as a third quarterback. And that's it, and I am happy. So I look at this room, and my first thought is we should be making a move with Daniel Jones. I think he is going to be the odd man out. I know he's Rich's favorite guy, but I think he is a bit of a sell-high candidate before we get to week 1 of the 2023 season.
Yeah, I think he's a really good sell-high candidate, but on top of the fact that Justin Herbert and Deshaun Watson are both on this team as well, there's not going to be many weeks that you'd even consider starting Daniel Jones. I mean, unless you have an injury to one of Herbert and Watson and the other is on a bye, Daniel Jones isn't going to see the field on a team that's a one-quarterback league like this. Add to it that this league is also 6-point passing touchdowns. So the advantage that Daniel Jones kind of had in a lot of the leagues last year where he was getting more value was he would have a lot of rushing touchdowns, and he had the rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. But when you're evening out that the passing touchdowns equal the same as the rushing touchdowns here, Justin Herbert's going to start over him every single week. Deshaun Watson's probably going to start over him every single week. And like you said, the developmental guy underneath it could be Brock Purdy down there, or even Levis if you prefer. But keeping those two, knowing that their value is probably not through the roof right now, and trying to move somebody like Jones, I think is a great move. So, I mean, the very first thing that I would be doing, especially in the GM tool, which is really nice, is you can sort it by quarterback like Dan has here and start looking at, yes, these teams that are at the bottom end of the pool and figure out, is this a team that might want to, move up from Derek Carr and Kenny Pickett to Daniel Jones, or this guy that's at 11, he's got Russell Wilson, Matthew Stafford, Mac Jones. So, I mean, Wilson and Stafford have both had good years in the past, but it's been rough. There was a rough last year. So does Daniel Jones kind of, inspire them at all? And I think both these teams washed up and the guy that was at 12, Yaya the Hutt, both of them, I believe, are like middle of the pack teams too. So I don't think they're teams that are necessarily rebuilding. So when we look at the overall of them, you probably can see that they are teams that might have interest in Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up, what are we looking to get back in moving Daniel Jones?
Right.
What is the weakness of this roster? And the first thing that sticks out to me, and I know you're probably going to agree, is the running back room. Yeah. We made a big move to grab Bijan Robinson. Mm-hmm. We could actually look at this past year's rookie draft in the app itself, which is a great feature to have. And I will warn you people, it is a bit shocking.
It's a shocking draft. This is one of the weirder drafts I've seen thus far.
But I have reached out to Dan, and he has confirmed that 103 is a Kenneth Walker owner, and my man just had to have Zach Charbonnet.
Had to have the handcuff.
Had to have the handcuff. Lock that backfield up in Seattle. But
maybe more shocking.
Maybe more shocking might be number 6 with the big man out of Georgia, Darnell Washington.
Yeah,
now,
I mean, Rich needs to cover his ears for this league because Dalton Kincaid was not the first or the second tight end taken in this draft. Darnell Washington and Sam Laporta both went ahead of him. So, yes.
Kincaid fell to 2-2, unfortunately. Yes. You hate to see it. But I did want to mention that Dan said he finished 7th in this league last year. Mm-hmm. So that means this Bijan 101 pick was something he traded for.
Right.
I didn't reach out to get the exact details of the trade because I don't think it's relevant to this conversation.
Sure.
But we already have Dan made one big move to get Bijan. Let's go make a couple more moves to make sure. Now you have to remember the window for competing with a running back, like a Saquon, like a Jonathan Taylor, like a Bijan, is what, 3 years, 4 years at best.
Yeah, I mean going into the rookie year, you'd hope 4 years for Bijan, the whole rookie contract. Yeah.
Because you look at even Saquon right now. I live in the greater New York City metropolitan area, and everybody's just talking about, is Saquon going to hold out? Is he going to get paid? Is he this or that? And we know what happens after those conversations happen, because let's look at Dalvin Cook and you look at Ezekiel Elliott. Mm-hmm. It's the same exact thing. Are they going to hold up in training camp 2 or 3 years ago? Now we're looking summer 2023, and both are currently street free agents.
Right.
So I want to make a few moves this year to make sure that Bijan doesn't go to waste on this roster.
Sure.
That doesn't win a single championship in the next 3 years.
Well, and I mean, when we look at that whole room, I mean, that's the biggest thing is, I mean, just look at the scores here for our running backs. Like Bijan is a 9,700 point running back. And then your running back 2 is Dameon Pierce down, just below 1,300 points. And Pierce had a lot of opportunity last year with the Texans. Dan told us he is a Texans fan, so maybe he still really believes in Pierce. But I think that Pierce might have a little down year compared to what he was last year. And that wasn't a running back one last year anyway. But if you're depending on Bijan plus one of Pierce or Roshan Johnson, I think you're going to be in a little bit of trouble. I think you need to find yourself a little more secure running back 2 on there that you can have faith in, or at the very least you need to have depth, right? Because running back is the most injury prone position that we have in all of fantasy, and his running back room is 3 players deep. So the odds of an injury are always high, and you're going to have to deal with bye weeks and stuff too. And in their current settings, you do have to start 2 running backs every week in this league. So the second you have one injury and you have a bye week, you now have an entire starting position that doesn't have anything in it. So definitely something we need to look at.
And now, before we go looking into some trades, let's just make reference to the rest of the roster so we have a complete picture.
Sure.
The wide receiver room is very nice. You know, like Tim was saying, in this league, you start 2 running backs, you start 2 wide receivers, and you start 2 flex. And spoiler alert, with this current setup, my man Dan is going to be starting 4 wide receivers. But it's not a bad 4 to choose from.
No,
you know, you got
of course not.
Jamar Chase, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Drake London, Chris Olave, 4 not only great wide receivers, young wide receivers.
Yeah,
like that
absolutely.
is a wonderful core
Yep.
to build a dynasty roster around.
Yeah.
And then you have, got your Marquise Brown. We'll get into that with the Arizona Cardinals and what we think of him for 2023 and beyond. And then you got some flyers in Sky Moore, Tank Dell, Terrace Marshall. So it's not a bad wide receiver room at all.
Absolutely.
And then the piece de resistance for the title run is your Travis Kelce at tight end. The cheat code, the difference maker. And this kind of goes back into the wasting the Bijan years. Is you also don't want to waste the prime Kelce years that you have left.
The twilight
years.
Years,
So this is the type of roster that we're going to go push the chips in and go win a ship, because guess what? We have a lot of chips to push. Let's take a look at these chips. My man Dan has been hoarding the draft picks. We have 224 first. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 25 firsts. Now,
and
if I was in a
324 seconds as well.
Yes. Now, if I was in a rebuild, this would be great, but we are at the precipice of a championship, I would say, with this roster. So let us not get into draft pick frenzy of hoarding these picks.
Right.
Let's use some of these. Go out and get some players, and let's go win some chips, because I don't think we're going to need to use all 625 first to acquire new players. We're going to be left over with draft capital. We shouldn't be concerned with not having picks at the end of the day.
And looking over the roster as a whole, I mean, if we're talking 1 quarterback league with the league setup, Kelce is the only position, the tight end position is the only position that doesn't have a lot of youth with it. I mean, we just talked about his receivers between Chase, Smith-Njigba, London, and Olave. He's got a year 3 guy in Chase, and then 2 year 2 guys and a rookie. So he's young already at wide receiver. Bijan is a rookie. Justin Herbert's nowhere near old yet or anything. So the need to have all of that, to have 8 first round picks in the next 2 drafts, it's not necessary. You can start using this team and trying to win, and using those draft picks for actual resources, using it as currency instead of as reinforcements for the team. So that's what I would be looking at as far as those draft picks go. And I have to say, I mean, looking at those wide receivers too, like I even disagree with our own rankings that I think Olave is actually probably my second highest of the 4 receivers that are on here. So you can kind of look through that, and you can move these guys of these 4 any which way. And so that's a really good group of 4. But outside of it, you have Hollywood Brown, who still has some value, or at least perceived value with the years he's had. Like we've talked about, you have Daniel Jones as an asset that you could possibly trade. You have 8 first-round picks in the next 2 years. I think it's time to go out and get yourself a running back.
Yep, I agree. So I was looking around the league, and I do have a trade partner in mind that I think would pair very nicely with us. Just give me 1 second to find where he is. It's going to be one of these teams. All right, there we go.
There we are.
Yaya the Hutt.
Okay.
So this is according to the GM Power Rankings, the 4th ranked team in the league. However, if we use the quarterback filter,
the worst quarterback,
Yaya the Hutt drops down to the 12th ranked team. So this is a team that is going to be looking to upgrade their quarterback position because this team probably believes they are in contention mode right now. So, and what I'm looking at is this running back situation over here for Yaya Hutt. I want to highlight two names right now. First name is Isaiah Pacheco. Pacheco is a undervalued asset right now in Dynasty, I believe. However, I'm not saying he's running back 1 this year.
Right.
I'm not saying he's going to finish as a top 12 running back, but on a squad where he's going to be your running back 3, he's a great running back to have.
Yeah.
So I think he's a perfect buy.
Yeah.
And then the second name I would mention is David Montgomery. I think David Montgomery is being overlooked currently in Detroit. I think he's going to be a plug-and-play replacement for Jamal Williams last year.
Yeah.
Jamal Williams was a touchdown machine, and David Montgomery, he's going to get all the goal line touches he can muster because, tell you what, Jahmyr Gibbs, he was not used on the goal line a ton in Alabama. He was the pass-catching threat. I think it's going to be very similar to what we saw out of Swift and Jamal Williams last year, where they're both fantasy viable. Swift because of his pass catching, Jahmyr Gibbs because of his pass catching, and then the goal line touchdown machine was last year Jamal Williams. Is this year going to be David Montgomery?
Right.
And also the other thing is David Montgomery, Pacheco. I just said they're going to be your RB3. They're going to be your RB4. They're going to get you through bye weeks. They're going to get you into your flex. You're not relying on them to be your 20-point plus producers because you have Bijan Robinson for that.
Right, right, exactly.
I think it's a perfect pairing of some great buy low running backs with a league mate who has a very clear need at the quarterback position when you're looking at a room that features just Derek Carr and Kenny Pickett.
Right, absolutely. And go down to his draft picks, if you would, just to kind of view. So, I mean, he has his own 24 first and 25 first, his own 25 second, 24 third. So it doesn't look like a guy that's made a lot of trades for draft picks either. So, I mean, there could be some interest there as well of pairing, he doesn't have a second rounder next year in 2024. Maybe a second rounder along with Daniel Jones to get both Pacheco and Montgomery, something of that ilk, which I think is something that could definitely interest, that man Dan, because again, Jones is not a guy that's going to be playing. He's going to be riding your bench. And even if Pacheco and Montgomery in your mind are not going to play over Pierce to start the year, you need to have depth. You need to have something that if somebody goes down that you can plug and play somebody else in. And Pacheco and Montgomery are going to get carries and they're going to get points. They might not, exactly like Dan said, they might not be those amazing top points, but you need to have some contribution from that running back 2 slot. And you're kind of playing hero running back here, right? Like there's the zero running back theory and hero running back theory. And this is more of the hero running back theory of I'm going to have Bijan Robinson. He's going to be the guy that's consistently scoring huge amounts of points. And then I just got to be league average at running back 2.
So let's open up the trade calculator in the GM 2.0 app. I just selected the players we've talked about before. Daniel Jones, Isaiah Pacheco, David Montgomery. Let's just hit compare, and let's see what that brings us. All right. So we got a left side total value of 1,180, a right side total value of 2,146.
Sure.
We are very, very close to having an actual trade take place. So what was the difference again?
About 1,000.
About 1,000 points. All right. So this is where our 25 first bundle is going to come into play, right? Let's just slap on one right now and see where it gets us. All right, so now we're down to 96 points, which is razor thin.
Just throw in Terrace Marshall if you need to.
Exactly. And it's the perfect time to move a player like Terrace Marshall. Yep. Tim and I were talking before recording. The camp buzz, the camp hype is palpable out of Carolina when it comes to the former LSU wide receiver. So look at that. We have a move of sending Terrace Marshall, Daniel Jones, and a 25 first. You're getting Isaiah Pacheco. You're getting David Montgomery. Now listen, sending firsts does not sound like a sexy Dynasty move.
Of course.
But Tim, you know what is sexy in Dynasty?
Banners.
Hanging banners, winning ships, cashing checks. And that's what this audit series is all about. We're trying to get you guys closer to your Dynasty Fantasy Football Championships.
I think this is a kind of move that gets you the depth you need to start the year, and is a high upside move as well. I mean, the way Pacheco is playing near the end of the year, the chances of Montgomery going into that kind of Jamal Williams role, this could pan out big time for thatmandan. And again, he's not losing anything that he's going to actually ever be putting into his starting lineup. Like, he'd have to have
that's a really good point.
He'd have to have an insane amount of injuries to not insane, but he'd have to have two major injuries in both Herbert and Watson for Daniel Jones to be seeing significant time. Terrace Marshall's never going to be starting over the 4 receivers and even the 5th and 6th that we kind of talked about that were on there. And the first is 2 years from now. You won't even be drafting this first come next spring. This is the kind of move that is like, none of this is actually going to be anything that can help me currently, but all of everything that's coming in return is things that I can use and probably will use throughout the year. So that's the kind of deal when you are the number 1 team in contention in your league. These are the kind of moves you got to make.
Yep. All right, so we have time to discuss one more quick trade for my man Dan over
here?
here.
I think so.
All right, so handcuffing.
Yep.
We should talk about handcuffing while we're here, especially
Really
with a running back room that's so thin that one injury can really just destroy you.
Yes.
And I think you brought up before the number 1 handcuff we should be targeting is none other than Tyler Algier, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So we can use our handy search function on the DynastyGM tool, and we can just figure out, hey, who has Tyler Algier? Because I don't want to scroll through 12 different names.
There he is.
All right. Are You Good Enough is the team that we're targeting. So this team, fairly strong quarterback room, plenty of running backs.
Mm-hmm. Algier's very low on the list, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of wide receivers as well. One thing I immediately notice is power rankings. This team falls in the 8th spot.
Yeah.
And this is also a team that currently has 324 firsts, which signals to me that this team may be entering a rebuild phase.
Right.
Which for Dan, who's going to be pushing for a championship this year, these are the types of teams that you want to talk to about potentially making trades. You know, if Are You Good Enough is already traded for 324 first, I bet you he'd be interested in another 24 first or even or 25 first. So this is the type of team. Now, Tim and I discussed this a little bit earlier today. Moves that I love to make in Dynasty are where you have a player you're targeting, but he's not the main part of the package. What I'm saying is when you're playing a low-value player, like targeting a low-value player like Algier, you include him on the back end of the package as kind of like a throw-in. Like, hey, just throw in Algier to make it, a bit even. The main player in this package that I would be targeting is somebody like a Tyler Lockett, or even if you want to go big, a Davante Adams. Now, we discussed that wide receiver core, how they're really good, really young, really strong. But if we could add even one more wide receiver as an option, I think that would be a move to really put this team over the top.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you agree, Tim?
Yeah. I think when you look at the receiver room for thatmandan, where he has London and Jackson Smith-Njigba in that room, I like the long-term look of what London and Smith-Njigba can offer, but I'm not totally certain that this coming 2023 season is going to be their big seasons. London still has Ritter as his quarterback. Smith-Njigba is still kind of the third wide receiver in that offense and, going to be coming into the league and figuring things out. So while I'm excited about the future for what those guys are for our contention window right now, they're not like home runs necessarily in what would be redraft kind of style leagues, where if you could get yourself a Lockett or an Adams, an older guy that maybe a team like Are You Good Enough is looking to sell because they kind of see the writing on the wall that they're getting older and they need to start acquiring draft picks, that would be kind of one of those players that could really get you over the top. If you're starting Davante Adams, let's say you get Adams. If you're starting Adams on top of Jamar Chase and Chris Olave going into the year with Bijan Robinson, that's a terrifying team. Like, that's a team that I think about when they show up on my weekly matchup, and I'm like, oh boy, how am I going to survive this one? So that's definitely something I would at least explore. And like you said, I mean, the biggest thing here is if you're looking to get Algier, the purpose of this trade is not just Algier, it's to improve the wide receivers. But if you were to go to him and just say, hey, I want Tyler Algier, he's going to go, well, why do you want Tyler Algier? Oh, because you have Bijan Robinson. You're going to want to pay up for him, and I'm going to make you pay up for him. So usually an owner is going to say, well, I can ask for pretty much anything because you have Bijan, so I'm going to say I want, 2 second-round picks for him and hold him hostage until then. Where this, if you give him a good enough offer that's going to be for that aging receiver and you just have Algier as the kick-in, they don't think of Algier as much. They're just like, yeah, I'm willing to throw him in to get this deal done.
Now, I'm looking at these values. I want to go big with this trade.
Sure.
Let's send Dan off with a bang.
All right.
Let's go get Davante Adams.
Let's do it, man.
Now, the player I would move off of, personally, is Marquise Brown.
I'm with you.
Marquise Brown is a player, I love him. The Arizona situation really, really worries me. I mean, I saw reports this week that Clayton Tune is being named as a potential week 1 starter.
Right.
So tell me you're trying to lose games without telling me you're trying to lose games.
Yeah.
So I struggle to see that offense scoring a lot of points.
Yep.
So I foresee a lost season coming in for Marquise Brown, which is not what we want on a contending roster.
Right.
He's still young. He still has the name value. You can still move him.
Yeah.
And if we look at his dynasty value, so you got a lost season in 2023. You got 2024, which, I mean, I don't know about you, Tim, but all the draft rhetoric I'm seeing already is, tank for Caleb and Caleb to Arizona, and where's Kyler going to go? So I just foresee a lot of drama and question in value for Marquise Brown for the next 12 to 18 months. Sure. So let's just move off of that and get us a piece that's going to go win us a championship right now. So
Right.
Marquise Brown, Davante Adams now. Listen, don't forget, down here we have our throw-in piece. Our real goal is getting Tyler Algier. For purposes of numbers, let's just see what this deal comes out to. So we're currently winning this trade by 226 points. That we can easily rectify, right?
Sure.
Because remember what we have. All those draft picks. Slap on another 25 first.
Yeah. And this is the thing, as I was going to say, as you were slapping on that first, is what it's going to look like on the very surface is, oh, well, now I'm losing this trade. Now this is a bad move for me because I'm not actually getting all the value I should be getting out of this. But again, you have to look at this from a different perspective. I think if you're looking at it right now that you think Hollywood Brown is worth almost the exact same value as Davante Adams, I don't currently think that that's necessarily true, especially with everything that you were kind of laying out there, Dan. But I think if you're telling Are You Good Enough, like, hey, man, you're getting older, you need to probably start retooling. Here's a first-round pick. You've been collecting picks. This is going to help for your rebuild. And here's a guy that just turned 26 at wide receiver instead of a 30-year-old wide receiver. And I just want the 30-year-old that's maybe got a year or two left because I'm competing now, and I want Algier as my handcuff. I think this deal makes sense for Are You Good Enough, and you need to make the deal enticing enough for them to want to move off the best player in the deal. And that's the thing you have to remember. While our values on here are showing you might be losing by 644 points, the best player in this deal is Davante Adams. So you do need to pay up a little bit in order to acquire that best player.
Yep. And like we said before, he has a stockpile 25 firsts.
Exactly.
So just to recap, what we have spent today is Daniel Jones, Marquise Brown, and 225 firsts. And in return,
and possibly Terrace Marshall.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Can't forget about Terrace Marshall over there. And in return, we got Davante Adams, David Montgomery, Isaiah Pacheco, and Tyler Algier. So we spent 2 draft picks that we won't see in use for another 2 seasons, a quarterback that is probably never going to enter our starting roster, and a wide receiver that would be, a flex play at best, given the wide receiver room that we have, who has a very questionable upcoming season as far as his value goes. In return, we have a wide receiver that has an easy shot to finish top 8 at his position this year. We got 2 running backs that can be your RB3/flex plays on any given week. And we got a handcuff for what is probably the biggest linchpin holding this whole contending championship roster together.
Right.
Dan, Go do it.
Go get it done.
Go make the moves.
I think you now have the depth at running back with these moves. You've added 3 running backs into that room, and you've gotten yourself one more premier wide receiver. When you're going into a matchup against you, and they're seeing Chase and Adams in the receiver room on top of Olave, Smith-Njigba, London, teams are just going to be shaking. They're not going to know how they're going to be able to beat you. So that's the entire crux of the whole thing. And then getting Algier, like Dan was saying, that's not just some like simple handcuff. He was over 1,000-yard rusher last year. So if something is to happen to Bijan and he gets hurt and he goes down, you're going to want to have the guy behind him in there. And that's a really cheap, easy add-in for getting the handcuff necessary for the hero running back that's on your squad.
Yeah, so this team is ready to push for a ship. Dan, go make the moves, and you're all in.
Good luck, Dan.
Good luck, Dan. That is it for today's Dynasty Audit Series. Tim and I will be back next time with another user's team. Remember, join the Nerd Herd, and you too can be audited. If you're not a Nerd Herd member right now, remember, Underdog Fantasy, promo code NERDS. They'll double your deposit up to $100. Go play some Best Ball Mania. Get yourself a Nerd Herd membership. Get yourself on the Audit Series. Get yourself some 2023 championships. We'll see you guys next time.